I'm going to talk to you today about placemaking. Now, many people ask me, what is placemaking? Placemaking is like homemaking. That is, a homemaker takes a house and turns it into a home. Placemakers take a space and turn it into a place. Now, for those of you who understand a bit about homemaking, homemaking has very little to do with the interior design of the space. I had two friends back in the 1970s called Charles and Rita. They were probably the poorest people I've ever met. When you went to their house was a very run-down house. As you went through the door, you could smell soup cooking on the old wood stove. Charles would be sitting in the corner with his big white beard and his Leonard glasses, sharing wisdom with some stranger who happened to be sitting in the lounge room. You'd sit on the couches that were covered in rugs that had been bought from an op shop because you knew underneath those couches were probably torn and tattered. But there has never been a place that I felt more nurtured as a human being than in that house. A number of years later, I rode past that house after they'd left, and I couldn't believe how run down it was. There were broken louvers, there was paint peeling. But somehow, Charles and Rita had managed to even incorporate the broken louvers and the peeling paint into the sense of place that was offered in that space. And so placemaking is much more, and often we get hung up on the design aspect of it when it's really about the creative spirit. It's about the human spirit that is brought to the space that turns it into a place. Now, I was actually asked to bring with me my street reclaiming chair. Unfortunately, it was broken. But this is my street reclaiming chair here, this suitcase. This is me in Prague. And a number of years ago, I did a world tour where I took this suitcase all around the world, and this is what comes out of it. Just decided to set it up in unusual places. One of the fascinating things about this tour was the way people responded to this chair in public places. We had a spontaneous street party here in the middle of the Champs-Élysées that meant that I got the last train home because there were so many people wanting to sit in the chair. And what fascinated me about this is that people took on a particular persona when they sat in the chair. This is in a disused parking lot in the middle of Los Angeles, inhabited by homeless people. When I was setting the chair up, the police came along and told me that I was absolutely crazy to be in this space, and particularly with expensive camera equipment. And yet what was amazing was this is a homeless lady, and look how regally she is sitting with her wand. And this was replicated over and over again, that people would suddenly take on this very regal, this very important, I am now the king of this space. In fact, I got an email one day on the tour from somebody who had sat in the chair in Prague, and he said, "Dear King David," and talked about how he had felt a lost soul until he'd discovered the chair, and that he'd reconnected with the artist that was inside of him, and he felt a new sense of direction. This is placemaking. Not the expensive kind that councils do, but this is placemaking. And there are three very important lessons to be learnt from this series of slides about placemaking. First of all, placemaking is not a product that you can say, we've arrived, we've created a place. Place is something that is experienced at a moment in time. It is an event. It is a moment in time when humans interact with their space. It's a bit like saying that just because you build a theatre, you've got a theatre. You don't have theatre until you've got actors on the stage, until there's an event where the audience is experiencing something happening. And as urban designers, we often forget that placemaking is not the building of the stage. Placemaking is what happens once the stage has been built. There's a very wonderful quote that says, "A space does not become a place until it is used for a purpose that was not intended by the designer." And I want you to think about that, because the moment somebody uses a space for other than you intended as a designer, they have made that space their home. They have taken it and in their hearts retrofitted it into a space that is important for them. When the designers designed Times Square, they did not design it saying, one day there's a crazy Australian author going to arrive with a chair that folds out of a suitcase, therefore we will make a nice smooth surface here just for him to set his chair up. I retrofitted the space to suit my particular needs at that particular moment of time. Okay, so let me start to unpack this whole notion of placemaking a little bit more for you. Placemaking is first of all 100% psychology. And I think in the brochure it talks about urban psychology, and I'll talk to you a bit about that in a moment. It's also 100% social and cultural. It's also 100% economic development. It's 100% design. And I deliberately put design at the end of that sequence because I believe that design should be the carriage at the back of the train. It's not the engine that drives the train. And I'll explain why in a moment. Today I'm going to be drawing some lessons from my time in Wodonga. I've just finished 2 years in Wodonga, which is a rural city of about 35,000 people on the border between Victoria and New South Wales. And in a strange set of events, I was invited to go and live in Wodonga for a period of time as the placemaker. My chief job was to retrofit this street, which was formerly a highway through the middle of town. So let me talk about the psychology part of it. One of the things I know without a shadow of doubt as I travel around the world is that every city, every community, every shopping precinct has some dominant stories that set a glass ceiling on what that community, that city, that organisation considers possible. Now, incidentally, you may think of Wodonga as a metaphor for you as a person. That will become a little clearer as I talk. Now, every one of us, whether we're an individual, an organisation, we have these subconscious stories that limit what we consider possible. I met a guy in the States once doing his thesis on the politics of the possible. There's a political process that sets the limit of what a community believes is possible for that community. If I go back to my freeway fight in 1987, I was the only one in our community that believed that we could win the battle, because there was a predominant story that the Premier at the time, some of you may remember him, Joe Bajelki-Peterson, meant that no community in the city had ever beaten him in a community fight before, and therefore we would put up a token resistance, but we couldn't win. Now that story was a dominant story that meant we couldn't win. That was setting the glass ceiling on what was actually achievable. Now, the dominant story in Wodonga is that just across the border in New South Wales is Albury, which is a sister city that was established about 17 years before Wodonga was established. Wodonga has always walked in the shadow of Albury. All the great shops are over in Albury. The Wodonga shopping centre is struggling, and it has always had that tag of struggle town.